The doors to the ballroom were glass and gold, and I was standing in front of them with my badge in my hand when Celeste Reed decided to make me a scene. She appeared from nowhere, the way she always appeared when there was an audience worth performing for. Silk dress, confident posture, the smile of someone who had decided they were the authority in every room they entered. "Wrong line," she said, loud enough for the security guard to hear. Loud enough for the people behind me to lean in slightly. She looked at my badge the way you looked at something you found unconvincing. "This is the donor entrance, not catering." My throat tightened. The guard was looking at me now with the hesitation of someone who had been handed a social cue by a well-dressed woman and wasn't sure whether to follow it. I kept my voice steady. "Scan my badge, please," I said directly to him. He scanned it. The reader flashed green. Authorized. Clear and immediate and factual. Celeste's smile cracked, just for half a second. The specific crack that happened when something you were certain about revealed itself as uncertain. Then she leaned toward me, close enough that only I would hear. "Authorized," she said softly, "doesn't mean welcome." I walked into the ballroom with my shoulders back and my face arranged into the expression I had been practicing for years, the expression of someone who belonged. The ballroom was already filling. Donor tables arranged in the specific geometry of events designed to make wealthy people feel important. Centerpieces, name cards, the kind of lighting that made everyone look like a slightly better version of themselves. I saw Malcolm across the room, Malcolm Reed, my director. The person whose name was on my employment contract and whose recommendation I had been promised for the operations role I had been working toward for 18 months. He saw me. I watched it happen. The moment of recognition in his face. The slight shift in his posture as he processed that I was here and that Celeste was behind me, and that those two facts together were a situation he would need to manage. He turned his body away. Not all the way. Subtle enough that someone not looking for it might have missed it. I didn't miss it. I walked to check in anyway, heart steady, face steady. The hostess ran her finger down the printed seating list. She looked up with the apologetic expression of someone delivering news they didn't create. "Paige," she said carefully, "you're not on the guest seating list." The hostess handed me a card. My name was printed on it in the Gala's official font. Clean, professional. Correct in every detail except one. The table number. I knew that table number. I knew what it meant in the geometry of this room. Side table. Near the service entrance. The kind of placement that communicated presence without access. The kind of seat that said you're here, but you're not visible. I also knew it was wrong because I had built the seating chart myself. 3 weeks of coordination, spreadsheets cross-referenced against donor giving levels, relationship histories, board preferences, and sponsor requests. The kind of work that looked simple to anyone who didn't understand what went into it and looked like precision to anyone who did. My name had not been at that table. My stomach dropped in the specific way it dropped when something you built had been altered by someone with access to your work and reasons you didn't yet understand. I took out my phone and photographed the card. Table number visible. My name visible. Then I photographed the card against the printed seating diagram on the check-in table, showing the location near the service door. My phone buzzed. "Malcolm, text message. Paige, do not make tonight about you." I pocketed the card and the phone and walked into the main room. I needed a moment. Not a long one. Just the kind where you locate your own breathing and remind yourself what you are here for and what you are not going to let someone take from you. I found a position near the arrangement I had overseen, the florals I had coordinated, the donor welcome materials I had prepared individually for 23 guests. Celeste drifted past 20 minutes later. She had 2 women with her. Donor wives. The kind of guests who attended these events because their husbands gave significant money and whose approval therefore carried weight. Celeste looked at me with the warm smile she used when she had an audience she wanted to impress. "Isn't it adorable," she said to the women, gesturing loosely in my direction, "when assistants dress up for events?" One of the women laughed, the easy laugh of someone following the room's cue. The other one didn't. She looked at me with a slightly uncomfortable expression, the expression of someone who wasn't sure what they had just been asked to endorse. That mattered. I filed it. Celeste turned back to me, still smiling. Paige's role is to support Malcolm, she said warmly. She's very good at it. The gala coordinator found me near the sponsored display. Her name was Wren, and she was handling every logistical problem of the evening with the kind of competence that nobody in the room was acknowledging, because competence at this level was considered standard. She looked frazzled. I offered to help. Calm voice, steady hands. The specific offer of someone who understood what the job required and had time to assist. Wren accepted. We moved behind the podium, where the digital event management system was running on a secured tablet. Donor schedules, seating arrangements, room logistics. The seating got flagged for a complaint, Wren said. Someone said their placement changed last minute. She showed me the file. I looked at the seating chart I had built, looked at the current version on the screen. Changes. Specific, deliberate changes. Not a system error. Not a last-minute coordination update. Someone had moved names, including mine. There's a revision stamp, I said. Wren looked at the log. The editor initials are CR, she said. I kept my face neutral. Do you know whose login that is? I asked. Wren looked at the admin credential associated with the change. Her voice dropped. That login, she said, belongs to Celeste. 3 weeks earlier, Malcolm had said it while I was reorganizing the files he had let scatter across the shared drive. Not in a meeting. Not in writing. In the hallway, while I was carrying his printed briefings, and he was thinking out loud in the way he thought out loud when he needed to feel generous. After the gala, he said, I'll put your name forward for operations. You've earned the recommendation. I had believed him. Not blindly. I had believed him because I had tracked what I had contributed. Because I had 18 months of work that had made his department look considerably better than it would have looked without me. I held on to that sentence like it was a document. I remembered the exact time, the light through the hallway window, the specific warmth of his voice when he wanted something to feel like a gift. Then tonight, while standing near Wren's tablet, my personal phone lit up with a work email forwarded to my secondary address. I read it twice. Operations role. Candidate under final review. The email listed qualifications. Timeline. The recommending director. My name was not in it. Not as a candidate, not as a reference, not anywhere. The name Malcolm had recommended was not mine. Evelyn Mercer walked through the donor entrance at 7:45. She looked the way she always looked. Put together, but impatient. The expression of someone who had chosen to be here because it mattered, not because it was convenient. Evelyn ran a mid-sized private foundation that had been one of our most consistent donors for 4 years. She gave meaningfully, asked questions, and expected the people handling her account to be competent and honest. She stopped at the coordinator station and looked at Wren. Where's Paige? She asked. She handled every call I had for the past 3 months. She's the only one who actually understood what our pledge was tied to. I stepped forward. Evelyn's face moved from slightly irritated to visibly relieved in the space of 1 second. There you are, she said. Like I was something she had been separated from, and was glad to recover. We shook hands. She asked about the revised pledge structure we had discussed in October. I answered specifically, from memory, because I knew it completely. Then her eyes dropped to the place card I was still holding. She looked at the table number. Then she looked at me. Why? She said. Are you shoved back there? I chose my words carefully. Not because I was afraid. Because I understood that this moment had a specific texture, and that the way I navigated it would determine what came next. There was a last-minute change to the seating, I said. One I didn't approve, and wasn't notified about. I kept my voice even. Factual. No emotion layered onto the information. Evelyn looked at me with the focused attention she used when she was deciding how seriously to take something. Show me the changelog, she said. She said it the way people said things when they had built careers by not accepting vague explanations. Directly. Without softening. I turned to bring up the tablet. Behind me, I heard footsteps, the specific pace of someone moving quickly because they had seen something they needed to intercept. Malcolm appeared at my elbow. His smile was on, the version he deployed for donors. Warm. Open. The smile that communicated this is my room and everything in it is fine. Paige. the tone of an employer addressing someone doing something they needed to stop. "Let's not keep our guests occupied with logistics." He directed the word "keep" at me like a leash. Evelyn looked at him. "I asked her a question," she said. Not warmly. Malcolm adjusted his approach. He laughed once. Lightly. The laugh that said he was taking this in stride and wasn't threatened by any of it. "Of course," he said. "I just don't want Paige getting in the weeds when she should be enjoying the evening." He said enjoying the evening to a staff member at a work event. As though my presence here was recreational. Evelyn did not change her expression. "She was answering my question about the seating logistics," Evelyn said. "For an event I'm partially funding." Malcolm's smile stayed, but it was working harder. I kept my face neutral. The face I used when I needed to be invisible enough to watch clearly. Then Celeste appeared. She materialized beside Malcolm, with the ease of someone who had been watching from nearby and had decided this was the right moment to step in. She looked at me with a smile that was performing concern. "Paige gets a little confused," she said to nobody and everybody simultaneously, "when she thinks she's the center of attention." Evelyn looked at Celeste, then back at me. Something in her expression settled into a direction. I recognized it. She had made a decision about what she was looking at, and it was not the decision Celeste had tried to direct her toward. 20 minutes before the first program segment, a staffer appeared at Wren's elbow with a problem. A high-profile guest had canceled. Health emergency, confirmed by their assistant 40 minutes ago. Their seat was empty at table 3. Table 3 was the front table. The one where board members sat adjacent to the highest-tier donors, the one where being seen mattered in ways that affected career trajectories and funding relationships, and the kind of connections that got remembered. Wren looked at me with the slightly panicked expression of someone who needed a solution faster than they could generate one. I had handled reseating before. I knew which donors were connected to each other, which relationships needed separation, which board member had requested proximity to which sponsor. I spoke quickly. Clean, specific recommendations, names and table numbers and rationale. Wren was already updating the system. Evelyn watched from one step back. Celeste had drifted back toward us during the conversation. She was standing slightly behind Wren, within reach of the check-in materials. When I finished the plan and Wren confirmed it made sense, Celeste smiled. "Perfect," she said, with the ease of someone claiming something that hadn't been offered. She reached toward the updated place card. "Put me there," she said. Celeste's fingers touched the edge of the place card. Evelyn said 2 words. "That's inappropriate." Her voice was not raised. It was the voice she used in board meetings when something needed to be named clearly and without theater. The air at the check-in station went still. Celeste looked at Evelyn. The smile stayed on, but it had become mechanical. The kind that kept running because the face hadn't received updated instructions yet. "Excuse me?" Celeste said. Evelyn looked at the table, at the card, at the seating plan Wren had just updated. "That seat was open to maintain donor relationships," Evelyn said. "The person who knows those relationships and just designed the reseating plan is the correct person to fill it." She didn't look at me when she said the next part. She said it to the general space, which made it more effective than if she had directed it personally. "Paige should be at that table." Celeste's response came immediately. The high laugh. The kind deployed to signal something was being treated as absurd. "Are we giving assistants prizes now?" she said. Light. Easy. Performing amusement. Nobody in the immediate circle laughed. Wren looked at her tablet. I looked at the card. I picked up the place card. Walked to table 3. Not quickly, not slowly. The pace of someone who had somewhere specific to be and was going there. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. My hands were completely steady. The table had 8 people already seated. A board member I recognized. 2 major donors from the East Coast. A foundation director I had spoken with twice on the phone. I set the card at the empty seat and sat down. The people at the table looked at me with the polite attention given to new arrivals. I introduced myself, said my name and my role, and the specific connection I had to the sponsorship work that several of them were invested in. The polite attention shifted. The foundation director said, "You're the one who worked out the pledge timeline issue last spring." "I am," I said. The board member leaned slightly forward. By the time the first course arrived, the conversation at the table was moving in a direction that felt like real work being done. The kind that didn't require performance, just knowledge and presence. I looked up once. Malcolm was standing near the far wall, watching me with the expression of someone watching a problem they had significantly underestimated. The program portion of the evening began 40 minutes into dinner. Malcolm took the podium. He was good at this. He understood rooms, understood the rhythm of public appreciation, the specific architecture of a speech that made generous people feel recognized without feeling calculated. He thanked the board, thanked the major donors individually, moved through the acknowledgments with polished efficiency. Then he said, "I want to specifically recognize the exceptional work in managing our sponsor relationships leading up to this event." My chest tightened. Celeste has been invaluable in keeping our donor connections warm and our partners engaged. He looked at Celeste, who tilted her chin upward as the acknowledgement landed, triumphant. My work, my calls, my 3 months of follow-up and pledge coordination and relationship maintenance, attributed to a person who had attended 2 lunches and altered a seating chart. I kept my hands flat on the table. Across from me, the board member was looking at his program. Evelyn set her fork down. The specific sound of it, deliberate, a decision made and placed on the table with the silverware. She looked at the stage, then she pushed her chair back slightly, raised her hand. "May I have the microphone?" she said. The room adjusted toward her. Evelyn stood up at table 3 with the posture of someone who had made remarks in rooms significantly larger than this one and was comfortable with the weight of being listened to. The MC handed her the microphone without hesitation. "You didn't hesitate with Evelyn Mercer." She thanked Malcolm. Briefly. The kind of brevity that communicated she was moving past him rather than building on what he said. She spoke about the organization, about what consistent funding relationships actually required, about the difference between events that looked polished and operations that genuinely held together under pressure. Then she said, "The person who maintained our pledge commitment through 3 transitions in project scope, who managed every communication with accuracy and genuine care, and who ensured this event reflects the standards we expect as partners." She turned. She looked directly at me. "Is Paige Whitaker." My name in that room, coming from her, with the full authority her history with this organization gave it. The heads that turned toward me moved almost all at once. Board members, donors, people who allocated significant resources based on credible information. They were looking at me like I had just come into focus. Malcolm's face went pale, because Evelyn had done the one thing he could not manage or redirect. She had made the truth visible, in front of the audience he needed most. I found the hallway by accident. I had stepped out to collect updated donor feedback cards before the dessert course and was returning through the corridor that ran alongside the ballroom's east wall. Celeste was waiting. Not by accident. She was standing in the middle of the corridor with her arms at her sides and her expression stripped of the performance she had been running all evening. Underneath it was something simpler and uglier. Rage. "You humiliated me," she said, her voice low, controlled but only just. I kept walking at normal speed and stopped at a reasonable conversational distance. "I didn't do anything," I said, quiet, specific. I sat where I was placed. Someone else said my name. Celeste's eyes were very bright. "You're an employee," she said. "You work for my husband's organization. You need to understand your place." I held her gaze. "I understand exactly where I stand," I said. Celeste stepped slightly closer. "HR is going to hear about your behavior at this event," she said. Very soft now. The specific softness of something meant to threaten rather than inform. "Monday morning, I promise you that." She walked past me. I stood in the empty corridor. Then I took out my phone and typed a note with a timestamp. Monday morning, the calendar invite arrived at 8:42. HR, performance concern. Malcolm Reed, copied. 90 minutes allocated. I looked at the invite for a moment, not from fear, from the clarity of understanding exactly what it was. This was how organizations punished people quietly, without accusations they couldn't defend, without specifics that could be challenged. A meeting where the language stayed soft and the message stayed sharp, and the person sitting across the table was expected to accept the narrative being offered. I was not going to accept it. I opened my email archive, printed the thread where Malcolm had verbally confirmed the operations recommendation and the follow-up I had set to document the conversation, which he had read and never contradicted. Printed Wren's event notes showing my involvement in the seating plan. Printed the donor correspondence going back 6 months. Emails between me and Evelyn, between me and 3 other major sponsors, with my name in the signature and my content in the body. I saved copies to my personal secure email. Clean, legal, outside company systems. Then I looked at the meeting agenda one more time. One phrase at the bottom under discussion points, misrepresentation of role. I closed the laptop and prepared what I was going to say. HR smiled the way they smiled when they had decided the outcome before the meeting began. 2 of them, a lead and a note-taker. The kind of setup that communicated we take this seriously while also communicating we have already decided. The lead explained the concern calmly, using words like overstepped and created a challenging dynamic and confused her role with a leadership function. I listened to all of it. Then I said, I'd like to understand which specific policy I violated at the event. The lead looked at the note-taker briefly. The concern is behavioral rather than a specific policy breach, she said. So there's no policy I violated, I said. A slight pause. The issue is how leadership perceived. What specifically did I do, I said, that was outside my role description. Another pause. Longer this time. Malcolm felt that your interaction with Ms. Mercer. Evelyn Mercer initiated that interaction, I said. I responded to a direct question from a major donor. The lead looked at her notes. Malcolm is considering whether your role remains the right fit, she said. My hands were flat on the table. Steady. I'd like that in writing, I said, with specific grounds cited. The note-taker wrote something down. I returned to my desk after the HR meeting. Pulled up the project management system. My calendar access had been reduced while I was in the meeting. The donor contact master list I had maintained for 14 months was locked. The event debrief folder I had been the primary contributor to had been archived. They were cutting my resources. Not dramatically. Precisely. The kind of access reduction that made a person look unproductive from the outside while making it impossible for them to produce from the inside. I had watched this happen to someone else 2 years earlier. Watched them become gradually less visible until they resigned. That was the plan. I opened a formal request through the IT ticketing system. Access reduction, confirmation required. Documented each change with the time it had taken effect. Requested written confirmation of what had been modified and by whose authorization. The IT response arrived 47 minutes later. Standard format. Ticket closed with a 1-line explanation. Access modifications requested by M. Reed. Malcolm, not HR, not an automated system review. Malcolm had personally requested the access reduction to my accounts the same morning as my HR meeting. Same morning. I saved the IT ticket, added it to the folder I had been building since the night of the gala. Then I opened a fresh document. The email arrived in my inbox by mistake. A forwarded thread sent from one of Malcolm's contacts to his address and accidentally copied to me. The kind of error that happened when someone clicked reply all on a thread without checking all the recipients. I read it before I understood what I was reading. Then I understood. The operations role. The one Malcolm had promised to recommend me for. The email contained an internal note from him to the hiring contact. He had recommended someone else. His justification used the phrase, less visibility in the organization, which I understood as code for someone who would not make him look inadequate by comparison. I sat at my desk and let the information settle. Not into grief, into something harder. I opened a blank document and began constructing a timeline. Dates, events, emails, conversations I had documented, access changes, the seating chart revision, the HR meeting, this email. A complete, accurate, dated account of everything that had happened from the gala backward and forward. My phone lit up. An email from an address I recognized. Evelyn Mercer's assistant. Miss Mercer would like to meet with you today if possible. She said to say it's important. Evelyn's office was 17 blocks from the building. I arrived at 2:30. She was already at the conference table her assistant had directed me to. She did not open with pleasantries. "Several donors contacted me this week," she said. "About what happened at the gala, about the seating change, about the acknowledgement." She looked at me directly. "They have started asking questions about the leadership culture there." I listened. "I won't fund an organization that humiliates competent people to protect insecure ones," she said. "That's not a value statement, it's a practical one. Bad culture produces bad outcomes for everyone's money." She asked if I would be willing to share a factual account of sponsor operations with the board liaison. Nothing inflammatory, just an accurate picture. Who managed what the outcomes were, what the documented record showed. I said yes. I stood to leave. Evelyn's assistant knocked and opened the door with a message. I looked at my phone as I walked into the lobby. Then I stopped. Malcolm was standing near the building entrance, waiting. He had known I was here, which meant someone had told him, which meant information about my meeting with Evelyn had reached him faster than I had expected. His face when he saw me was not the donor-facing version. Malcolm suggested his office when I returned to the building. I sat down. He closed the door. The specific click of a door closed by someone who wanted a conversation to stay inside the room. He sat across from me and folded his hands on the desk. His smile was the thin version, the one that appeared when he had exhausted the wider, warmer model. He said he wanted to clear things up, said there had been misunderstandings, said he valued my contribution and had been discussing options that might work better for everyone. Then he explained the options: a salary adjustment, not large but meaningful enough to sound like consideration, with conditions. I would remain in the assistant role. I would not have direct contact with major donors going forward. I would redirect donor inquiries to him or to Celeste. I would stop initiating meetings with board-adjacent contacts. He said all of it in the tone of someone offering something generous. I looked at him when he finished. "Put all of that in writing," I said, "including the salary terms and the access conditions. I'll review it with counsel." Malcolm's expression shifted. Then he said the thing he had been building toward. "You're nothing in this field without my name," he said, the smooth version of his voice entirely gone. I stood up. "Thank you for the meeting," I said. The board liaison's name was Petra Voss. She met me in a neutral space, a conference room at a law firm her board used for independent reviews. Not my organization's building, not Evelyn's office, neutral ground. I arrived with a printed summary, 6 pages, clean font, no emotional language anywhere on it. Donor touchpoints with dates and outcomes. Event logistics with documented contributions. The seating chart revision with the changelog attached. The IT ticket showing access removal under Malcolm's authorization. The HR meeting notes I had requested in writing. The forwarded email about the operations role. Everything factual, everything dated, everything with an attached source. Petra read it completely. She asked 3 clarifying questions, specific and precise, the questions of someone building an accurate picture rather than filling in a narrative already decided. When she reached the last page, she set it down. She looked at me across the table. "This represents a serious risk to donor confidence," she said, "and a potential breach of fiduciary management." Her face had the quality of someone who had been hoping to find something manageable and had found something larger. "We need an internal review," she said. That afternoon, a company-wide email went out. "Leadership restructuring. All hands meetings scheduled for tomorrow." The investigation meeting was on the executive floor. Formal, structured, an outside investigator hired by the board. Petra Voss present. 2 independent board members, HR's compliance officer who was not in Malcolm's direct chain. Ren was there as the Gala coordinator. A systems analyst named Oren, who had helped pull the digital log, was present remotely. Celeste was not there, because Celeste was not an employee. The investigator noted that at the beginning of the session as significant, because the person who had made changes to a company event management system under a company login was not a company employee. That fact sat in the room. The changelog went up on the screen, the seating revision, the timestamp, the credential used. The seating chart was altered using Celeste Reed's login, the investigator said. No soft language. Just the fact. Malcolm started to speak. I watched him construct the version where this was an honest mistake, where Celeste had been helping in good faith, where I had complicated a simple situation. The investigator looked at him. "Mr. Reed," she said, "can you explain why you revoked Miss Whitaker's system access the morning of her HR performance review?" Malcolm's answer did not arrive quickly. The board moved with a speed that surprised people who underestimated how quickly institutions acted when funding was genuinely at risk. 3 of the 4 major donors who had been seated at Table 3 contacted Petra Voss within 48 hours of the restructuring announcement. Their concerns were specific. They had observed something at the gala that did not match the organization's stated values. They were pausing pledge commitments pending the review's outcome. Pausing pledges was how major donors communicated that they were watching very carefully. Malcolm appeared at the follow-up investigation session with legal counsel, which told everyone in the room something about how confident he felt in his position. His answers were more careful than they had been in the first session. They were also less consistent. The investigator was very good at noticing where careful answers became inconsistent ones. The board met the following Friday. I was at my desk, preparing the donor briefing materials Petra had asked me to have ready in case the review required them. My phone rang, Petra's number. She told me the board had voted. Malcolm was removed from the director position effective immediately, pending the full investigation outcome. She asked me to stay available. Then she said, "We need someone who understands how these operations actually work, someone the sponsors trust." She paused. "Are you willing to step into an interim capacity?" I said yes. Not breathlessly, not with the performance of gratitude that suggested I was surprised to be asked. With the steady acceptance of someone who had always known what they were capable of and was simply receiving the accurate title for it. The transition took 2 weeks. My role was formalized through an offer letter that Petra and board counsel reviewed. Operations leadership. Interim designation with a full review at 90 days. My badge updated. Celeste's name disappeared from organizational communications with the speed of someone whose presence had always been borrowed from a position that no longer existed. She had not worked here. She had moved through this space because Malcolm had allowed it. Without Malcolm's position, the borrowed authority evaporated completely. There was no confrontation, no dramatic exit, no apology from anyone I had not already stopped expecting one from. Just the quiet administrative reality of power redistributed accurately. 3 months later, the organization held its next annual gala. I walked through the donor entrance with my leadership badge on my lanyard and my name in the organizational program as operations director. The scanner flashed green. Authorized. I walked through the doors, found my seat at the front table, sat down without rushing, without looking around for permission, without anyone questioning it. Celeste had mocked my badge like it was my ceiling, so I turned it into my ladder. And I never looked back.